again. This is Genevieve Santini. I did my article research paper on food safety regulations between the United States and the European Union. Now, the USA has the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, while the European Union has EFSA, and that stands for European Food Safety Authority. These are the corresponding forces that basically guide food safety regulations in their respective homelands. They deal with everything from farm to table. This includes the growers, the farmers, the suppliers, the buyers, and even the food scientists and the consumers that purchase the product when everything is said and done. The beginning of the article was really interesting because it dove into what classifies a person to be an expert in this industry. With so much responsibility, it's really important that all members remain objective and neutral, and the governments of these respective forces must also provide guidelines to the advisory committees that are essentially making decisions on the food and beverage that we consume every day. These same governments, a percentage of them needs to account for what is known as the layperson, or the objective consumer who, at the end of the day, is doing all this purchasing, is consuming all the food. While this might cause criticism from outside forces who don't know any better, this could really enhance the credibility of the decisions made of these parties by extending authority to its citizens. The other interesting thing between these two organizations is that they need to be honest with the general public, but they need to keep them at ease at the same time. So you find that they're putting out results and they're putting out transcripts, but how much of that is really going to keep the public at ease? There are people who obviously worry when they see that there's a percentage of arsenic or droppings or bugs in the food that they consume. So the first group I'd like to talk about is the FDA. I'll get into EFSA and then kind of compare and contrast the two. So the FDA has two committees. There is the Food Advisory Committee and then the Science Board. So the Science Board is more specific, and they meet 1 to 4 times a year, and they rotate out on a 4-year basis. These members, they come from a variety of organizations, and the FDA makes certain that minorities, so people of color, women, and disabled people are all equally represented. There's 3 types of advisory committee membership, and that is academician, practitioner, consumer, and industry. The only people, however, that are allowed to vote are the academics and practitioners. And that is because they hold levels of credentials and expertise in their specific fields. The FDA doesn't regulate each meeting individually. It does provide issues to be discussed amongst the committee members. The minutes and transcripts have to be provided to the general public, and they need to be submitted to Congress. The only time that meetings are closed from the public is when it pertains to premature disclosure, issues of privacy, trade secrets, things of that nature. And this is only when they could be affected. The subject matter, while it may vary, the hearings are conducted where they review issues and then they provide advice and recommendations to the people bringing up said issues. The hearings typically contain clinical evidence supporting the interest in changes needed to be made to regulations, any regulation, either an existing or a new regulation that needs to be submitted. The FDA's focuses are typically more generalized. It keeps them less governed as a whole, but this could lead to, the agency writing off recommendations. The FDA also has more direct channels for the layperson to pose participatory dialogue, and an unusual perspective is what they used in the article, which is really interesting. You have the average person that comes in and they're really concerned about how a certain food or drug is affecting their family or their child, and they want to change a certain law so that they could know exactly what's in whatever they're consuming. Now moving on to EFSA. They're pretty different. At the end of the day, they both want what's best for the general public because it's in their hands. So they have, from the top, a management board, an executive director, a secretariat, an advisory forum, a scientific committee, and scientific panels. And the scientific committee and the scientific panels, they basically work hand in hand. The management board elects members directly, the scientific committee and scientific panels, and that's in increments of 3 years, 3-year terms, I'm sorry. The EFSA, they review candidates based on merit and credentials, similarly to the FDA. They are, I would say, interviewed more strictly because they make certain that they have the merit and the credentials before they are put on the board. They are also tested for being able to work under high stress situations. So the scientific committee coordinates and oversees the scientific panels, as I said. The scientific committee focuses a lot on oversights that could be caused for, by any reason. And this structure in particular allows the scientific panels to work more independently on additional matters of their choosing, rather than operating as the FDA does, where majority rules on which issues are of more importance and which issues need to be studied further. So I don't really know if the EFSA has some free time, but it's really interesting that they get to kind of veer off from what's being done. I'm sure that, secondary projects are happening all the time, or B-story projects happen all the time. EFSA meetings are more structured than the FDA. The majority vote by members requires their scientific committees to act. The guidelines created by the government are stricter, and all the hearings must be addressed. Unlike the FDA, once an issue is discussed, working groups are created for further deliberation. So under EFSA, if a new scientific discovery is made that is quote-unquote divergent from existing data, EFSA is required immediately to tell all bodies within that claim there may be new facts that need to be addressed with a new joint document. So they meet pretty quickly in order to see, what changes need to be made. And if they need to go and conduct clinical research, they have to say on a website or, to that company personally, this has been discovered. You need to make changes to your website. You need to make changes to what you're telling consumers from now on. Sometimes they make them recall their product until further testing is done. And then, have this kind of adjunct time until they figure out what's going on. And this is typically done with a clinical study. So, in addition to some of these differences, EFSA is not as transparent as the FDA is. They publish they publish all of their results, but they don't have to publish all the transcripts and minutes from their meetings. And the other thing is that members don't have to be physically in attendance of any of these meetings. This has been a cause for concern of members of the European nation over time, because they want the transparency. They want to know exactly what's going on in these meetings. So this article discussed a current issue that both of the organizations were taking into account when the article was published, and that is acrylamide, which is an additive found in high carbs, so bread, pasta, potatoes, cereal, etc. And acrylamide has been linked to cancer and has a risk of forming in foods being cooked at high temperatures. So, after being shown clinical studies and research, EFSA worked to reduce concentrations of acrylamide over time. The FDA conducted similar studies and discussed what kind of limitations to put on acrylamide that would be safe for human consumption. And they have provided information on their website and have concentrated more on consumer outreach and awareness. So the difference in that was that EFSA did studies to figure out how little concentration of acrylamide, what's the max acrylamide that we can have in our food before it becomes dangerous, whereas the FDA may have made changes, but they just posted and were focused more on putting it on the website and putting the warning labels on the food. So the questions that remain the questions that remain are, how much say does the general public or the lay person have over time? And are these two corporations working towards the well-being of the people that they're, sworn to protect, essentially? They're government entities. So the FDA, like I said, they have more direct channels than EFSA does. It enhances their credibility when you include the general public. But EFSA has a more informal process which can create dialogue. And, it's not limited to the general public. They're just not going to go out of their way. And my conclusion on this is that both of these bodies work towards the well-being and safety of its people, regardless of how much is submitted to the general public for scrutiny, because there's always going to be a critic. The facts that remain hidden will affect the short and long-term consequences, which is in their hands. So that's it for my article. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful night. I'm going to go study for my exam now. Bye!